Come see this thing 1580, trying something different. Which way Ukraine? Exclusion via exclusivity. This is a series where I summarize rantatonne posts made up of at least 3 things I have read, seen, or heard. First question, have you heard of the Austrian School of Economics? There may be certain things that seem to be far more important than getting to know about a school of economics, but with the focus on the actions that humans take based on cost-benefit analyses that the Austrian school has, the conversation with Joe Salerno in this section shows that economics really has a lot to do with things that you think were only based with money, currency, and other financial spheres. Like the section that follows this next question. But can't the USA use its powers as a global superpower? Look, I do not know what the overreaching plan was of Project Ukraine, but from what I've seen, I have previously mentioned my story about setting a warfare/welfare state laundromat for the proletaati and illiterati of the West, with the hopes that the regional familiarity and proximity on the continent could overcome some of the complications that it has doing these things in the Middle East, for example, which spectacularly ended with Afghanistan pullout. And it's also being shown that with how interconnected the globalized world is, the West no longer has carte blanche to just muck around in the Middle East. Like you can see, it's reconsidering its support for Israel due to the negative global reaction. So let's do it in Project Ukraine. White people on white people violence. That's something that people are kind of more accepting. Accepting might not be the right term, maybe more used to it. If you actually look at the history of Europe, it has been having an unusual time of peace before this last, not even this last, there's been other things happening there. Just like the things that were happening in Yugoslavia, which is one of the recent examples of peace being achieved by international recognition of the redrawing of borders. So when it comes to the meeting that's going on today, August 15th, between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, some of the commentary is just absurd. Some of the people are saying things like, oh, Trump has no right to give up any land to Ukraine, it's Ukrainians' land. Sure, even though United States of America is kind of puppeteering this with the West and the NATO powers, and if US stops funding it, then Ukraine is out of luck, so it has some influence. But when it actually comes down to it, it's not Trump's land to give over. Is it Zelensky's, even though he's in there after his presidential election? Speaking about elections, have we talked about those regions, how they've mostly Russian speakers, mostly ethnically Russian, who have voted for some separation from Ukraine? If that was allowed, would that be something sufficient? Now, for some people, they're just so anti-Trump, whatever he does is not. Or in the other aspect, they're just so America F yeah, where they're thinking being a global superpower means you have some sort of superpowers that you can go in there and say, Putin, you must leave. I mean, Uncle Sam is booting you out. How are you going to remove him from those locations he already has? Russia's aggressive attrition isn't ending. And I was going to say that, hey, what if you flip the numbers around and the numbers that you thought Ukraine had lost was actually what Russia had lost, and the number you thought Russia had lost is what Ukraine lost? But most of the people who are commenting on this don't really care about those lives. Last question, is this the equivalent of reverse racism for wealth? Keep in mind the way folk treat a given X going on between Russia and Ukraine versus Israel and Gaza. And there's a video in this section that shows how race Marxists don't want to be excluded but want the right to be exclusive. White X is bad but need to establish and maintain POC X. This is not because the use of X or private property is bad, but rather it's some misunderstanding of the way the world works, that they think they need the property that white people have, or if white people have a certain X, then they can't have their own X. Could profit from getting to know more about the Austrian school.